What's up, guys? Welcome back. As you know, your boy is on a crusade against personal trainers. I consider them scammers because they're guys that just do a couple months on a course, then have a test, then they get the certificate, then without ever lifting a weight in their lives, go on to coach people, and because their advice suck ass, they get no results, and people pay them for that. So it's fair to call them scammers in my own point of view. With that, I tell you this because today we're fucking up some personal trainers. I'm basically going to give you guidelines you can follow to tell if a program is good or if the person making it should start lifting weights because they don't know what they're talking about. So without further rambling, we can start with the video. The first thing we need to think about is basically your schedule, your split. So a split should maximize the amount of high quality tonnage you accumulate while minimizing junk volume. At the same time, it should hit the muscle groups in their desired frequency because some muscle groups require more frequency, like the back, and some require less, like the legs. I hit my legs every full moon, so you can figure. It was a joke. With splits, with that criteria, on top of that, you also want to be time efficient. You want to maximize synergy, so you are not 40 hours in the gym isolating every single fiber of the muscle group. An example of this would be instead of doing front raises, lateral raises, chest flies, then lower chest flies, and then doing extensions. What you end up doing is basically an overhead press, then you follow that with a bench press, and then you follow up with an extension. That would be a proper way of doing it. That's what synergy is about. You synergize the pressing muscles, which are the shoulders, the chest, and the triceps, to save time. On top of that, you can add supersets with antagonistic muscle groups. That's also synergy. So you would do your overhead press with chin-ups, your bench press with rows, and like supported rows, and then you do your extensions with curls. That's also synergy. The same applies to legs. Only that you don't want to superset hinging and squatting. Okay, they still target the same muscle groups, just in a different fashion. It's more of an overhead press, bench press kind of thing. So with that in mind, with that criteria, we can basically distinguish 3 tiers of splits, which I call dog shit, mid, and god tier. In the dog shit category, we have bro splits because they go against every single principle that I just said, if you think about it. They are long workouts that accumulate a lot of junk volume. They don't have the best exercise selection, and on top of that, they really don't allow you to recover. So, and also they usually fail because it's very hard to isolate just the chest without just doing flies, which is not very conducive to muscle growth, and it's not very progressible on because progression is still very important for muscle growth. So keeping that in mind, bro splits are shit. Then push-pull legs and body part splits are mid. They're fine, but they can be better. It's very hard to squeeze in isolation on push-pull legs, for example. Also, you don't have that synergy of push and pull, which is pressing, and back, which would be pull-ups and rows for back, and horizontal and vertical pressing for the pressing. And on top of that, you're in the gym 6 times a week just to get twice a week frequency for every single muscle group, which is not really that good. On top of that, you really don't get a lot of synergy because of the overlap between the pull days and the leg days, unless you program your deadlifts on the leg days. And even still, you can find issues with the programs. So it's better if you focus on the god tier splits, which is full body and upper lower with their variations. It can be full body 3, 4, 2 times a week, and upper lower it can be upper 4 times a week, upper lower 6 times a week, upper lower arms, upper lower, I don't know, upper lower push and pull, stuff like that. Those are more hybrid splits, but still. These are basically god tier, and they allow you to maximize your time efficiency, maximize high quality tonnage accumulation, and minimizing junk volume, while still allowing you to hit your desired frequency for each of the muscle groups. For your back, for example, if you allow yourself to hit back both on the upper days and on the lower days with different exercises and with different emphasis, you'll see way better results. Try saying that multiple times. So the first thing is the split. The second thing is going to be volume per session and weekly volume. Weekly volume should be 8 to 12 sets for beginners, tops. So you don't want to do any more than that. That's enough stimulus for you. In terms of how you would spread it per session, I would say that if you're going to train 2 times a week, it should be 4 to 6 sets per session. If you're going to train 3 times per week, it should be 3 to 4 sets per session. Or you can play around with having more volume on one session and less volume on others, like heavy, light, medium, right? So you have like maybe, I don't know, you have 12 sets, right? So you do your 6 sets first, then you have like 3 sets or 2 sets, and then you have like 4 sets on the medium day, something like that. I don't know if I did the math correctly, but you get what I mean. Then we have exercise selection. So this one is very important because then you're going to realize which is a good coach and who isn't. The first thing is going to be how many exercises. You'll see a lot of personal trainers they're going to recommend a bro split, and you'll see that they have a laundry list, for example, for chest day, like 50 different like chest movements, and that's a bad program. So for beginners, I would say 2 to 4 compound exercises per muscle groups and 1 to 2 compound exercises per session. Then for isolation, you want to do 1 to 2 movements total and 1 movement per session. So for example, you have on a single session, you have a vertical press, a horizontal press, and then you have a single triceps isolation, and that's enough. You don't need to be hitting every single angle to hit all of the fibers. As long as you take the sets close to failure enough, you're going to be fine. Then we have to talk about the type of movements. So for compounds, I classify them as heavy and spammables. For compound movements, you want to have at least a heavy movement. You can have 2, and then you want to have 1 spammable movement or 2. I'm going to give an example in a second. And then for isolation, you want to have 1 mid-length or concentric movement, and you want to have a stretching movement. The stretching movement is mandatory in my opinion. So basically that. Then in terms of order, what you want to do is you want to start with the heavier stuff first, and as the session progresses, you go lighter and lighter. So you go with the most heavy hitting stuff first, and then you keep fitting tonnage. You think of it as rocks, right, in a jar. I think basement bodybuilding uses this analogy, but basically you have a jar, you put big rocks first, then you put in smaller rocks to fill in the gaps of the big rocks on the jar, and then you put in smaller and smaller portions of rock, if you will, like pebbles, so they fill up the jar completely. That's what you want to do with your sessions and with your exercise selection. So an example of this would be starting heavy with a squat, then moving on to a spammable movement like a leg press, and then finishing off with leg extensions as an isolation. Now, in terms of how you would distribute it in between sessions, I would say that it's better if you have a session where you start with a heavy movement and then you have an isolation, unless you're just going to train. If you're doing a bro split, you can do this like heavy squat, leg press, and then leg extensions. But if you're following the other splits, what I would recommend is have one session where you do your heavy squats and then you do your leg extensions, and then have another session where you do your leg press and then you do another spammable movement like hack squats. I think that would be way better because then it's going to allow you to use the synergy to implement more exercises there that will cover for the deficiencies of, in this case, the squats. So a hinge. So on the session number 1, you could have squats, then you have Romanian deadlifts, and then you finish off with hamstring curls and leg extensions, right? So you have a complete lower body day. Then for the session 2, you have a deadlift, then you have leg press, and then you have your hack squats. That's how I would do it. But I don't train legs, so what do I know? So with that in mind, we have to also think about combining, as I alluded before. So with combining, you want to think about pulls and pushes, and squats and hinges. Pulls and push, basically you can superset them, and they're going to allow you to do a lot of work in a small amount of time, and it's going to give you a balanced physique. Squat and hinge are not that way. With squat and hinge, you don't want to superset, but you do want to include them in your session. So you want to do a squat and then you want to do a hinge, something like that. Unless you want to gear it towards more one side than the other. For example, you want more quads, so you do, instead of doing 2 hinges and 2 squats, you do 3 squats and 1 hinge, and that's fine. Then when it comes to isolation, there isn't a lot of this type of combining, but we can point out biceps and triceps, quads and hamstrings, and then we have the floater movements, the floater muscles, which are abs, neck, calves, forearms, and rear delts. You can basically superset them with anything. In fact, I would say you can superset biceps and triceps, and on top of that, you can add some rear delts. You can do quads, hamstrings, and then you can do forearms. And then you can do abs, necks, and calves all together. That's just an idea that popped into my mind. So that's the guidelines in general. To recap, it should have a decent split. If it's a pro split, run, right? 8 to 12 sets per body part a week, with 2 to 3 sessions a week per body part. 2 to 4 compound movements and 1 to 2 isolations total. No more than 2 compound exercises per session. No more than 1 to 2 isolations per session. And then you want to mix pull and push, squat and hinge. And of course, you want to include some type of isolation work. So with those guidelines, you can build basically a overall template of a program, or you have at least an idea of what a good program should look like. So the next time that someone shows you a program, you can be like, okay, does it start with a heavy movement? Does it have later spammable movement? Does it have isolation work? What's the volume like? What's the exercise order like? Does he mix properly push and pull? Does he not? Does he implement isolation properly? Does he not? And there you can see if the guy that made the program knows what they're talking about. So without any extra things to say, thanks for watching as always, and leave me your thoughts in the comments below. So yeah.